unfortunately, I and a couple of my colleagues got shot, and one of the rounds, well, I caught up a burst just up, strafed up the side of the wall, and one round went through the side of my neck, and the other round ricocheted off the side of my helmet. And the one round that went through my neck, unfortunately, hit directly into my spinal column and severed my spinal cord from sort of the high cervical vertebrae down, which stopped me breathing instantly and paralyzed me for the rest of my life.
Well, my guest on the Freedom Pack podcast today is Tobias Gutteridge, a former member of the UK Special Forces, an avid motocross rider, surfer, overall extreme sports enthusiast. He is the founder of extreme sports brand Bravery and the author of his new book, Never Will I Die, the inspiring Special Forces soldier who cheated death and learned to live again. Tobias, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Cheers. I really appreciate it.
Well, as I mentioned to you before we started rolling, we've had plenty of Special Forces guys on this show before, such as Mark Billingham, Ollie Ollerton, General Stanley McChrystal. And what fascinates me about you guys is the sort of mindset lessons and the personal development we can take away from, you know, everything you've taught yourself throughout your career. And I've watched a couple of interviews and podcasts with yourself, and everyone seems to talk about you and your career in high regard you as a top class at what you did. And so it begged the question for me, in your experience, what do you think the main differences are between those who are average or good and those who operate in the top few percent? What makes the difference?
Well, I don't think it comes down to one specific thing that's going to make the difference. I think there's a combination of quite a few things that just almost make the perfect storm, really, and that makes you perfectly suited for the job that we did. If that's one, yeah, that's how I would put it. Certain things like the number one thing for me was, once I set my mind on something, I've always had this thing where I've become very obsessed with it, and I couldn't let it go until it was the best that it could be. And that's from even when I was a child growing up, throughout my entire life. Anything I've set my goals on, it's become like almost like a challenge between me and myself. So I've just become like a dog with a bone, and I cannot let it go until I get to the best possible place that I can be. And I think that's one of the most important things that I found got me to where I was. And from chatting to my former colleagues, they were very similar with this regards. Everything they did almost became a challenge against themselves, and they just couldn't let it rest until they were at that level where they couldn't get any higher. And I don't know if everyone's like this, because throughout my military career, I did come across a lot of people who were pretty content with where they were in their careers and things they had done, and I'd always find this quite fascinating. But for me and for those colleagues of mine who were in that SF realm, it was was different. It was totally different. And I think, yeah, that's the main thing I think I can really draw on for your listeners, is that you've got to be all in, 100% obsessed with something. If you want to get somewhere, you can't just have a half go at it or a half crack. You've got to be fully invested. And that really takes you all the way, whether you like it or not, because you just can't let it be, if you know what I mean by that.
So you talk about being all in and setting your mind to something. In your experience at a young age, what attracted a young Tobias to a career in the military? And do you remember the moment where it really clicked for you and you thought, I'm all in on this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, my family's always been quite affiliated with the military, but I think there were a few things there again. It was like I've always been, you mentioned in the beginning there, I've always been a bit of an adrenaline seeker. I've always wanted a bit of a rush, and I've always lived my life on the edge. I've always been a bit of a daredevil and things like that. So the military has that appeal. So that was the first thing that always drew me kind of towards the military. And I think there was a night when I was out. This was still back in South Africa, and I was out drinking with a few buddies of mine after work, and we were in a pub, and there were these four guys sitting in the pub by themselves, minding their own business, having a few drinks and a few laughs, and we were sitting pretty close to them, and we could overhear them, and we could tell that they were English, they had British accents, and anyway, after a few drinks, they started playing this game where they all started taking the piss out of each other, and then they'd sit in a circle, these 4 or 5 guys, and the one guy would just slightly tap the next guy on the cheek, and then he would tap the next guy on the cheek a little bit harder, and then the next guy would tap the next guy a little bit harder, and eventually it would just get harder and harder and harder. So eventually they were slapping each other pretty hard, and then it became a punch. And they just thought this was the funniest thing ever. And I think the point of the game was really to see who would tap out first. And as a young kid, I remember this, and I was so fascinated by it. I had to go over to them and ask them, and I was like, "What are you guys doing? Where are you from? What's this all about?" And they told me, they were all in the Marines, British Royal Marines, and I started chatting to them, and they then started telling me the stories of what they'd been doing, what they were doing in South Africa, about travel, about places they'd been in the world, and people they had met, the training, how tough it was, how grueling, and it just resonated with me. And at the time, I was really looking for something. I was really at a point in my life where I really was trying to seek out what it was I wanted from life. And that was the moment that I just knew I was 100% and I was all in. And from then, I just went straight, bought myself a ticket, bought myself an airplane ticket, packed a backpack, and decided, I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my mates, I didn't tell anyone. I just came over to the UK. started packing shelves in Tesco's, rented a flat, and went down to the careers office, walked in and said, I want to join the British Royal Marines. Straight up, yeah, and never looked back really. But that was the moment, that night in that pub, I think, was the night I just thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm in. I'm 100% in, and I was fully immersed in it, fully 100%.
Well, what a story. And were your parents quite supportive of your decision once they eventually found out?
Once they eventually found out, no, not at all. I don't come from a very close family. My family's not very close. I don't have very supportive parents, and they weren't really interested, if I'm honest. And they were just like, whatever, Toby, go, just do your own thing. Just don't bother us. So they weren't particularly bothered, and I think that, if I'm honest, that hurts a little bit, because I remember when I passed out of Royal Marines training, when I got given my Green Beret, I was the only person in my troop who had no family there at the pass out parade, and I didn't have any siblings or any parents or relatives or anyone. And there were all the other guys there who had their moms and dads and brothers and sisters and everyone else, and I just had no one. So that kind of hurts a little bit, and I think it stuck with me for a very long time. Probably have some underlying feelings about it, but to be honest, the bottom line is, no, I didn't have very much support, but I believed in myself. And going back to your original question, what makes us different from the rest? You've also got a 100%. You got to 100% believe in yourself, no matter who doubts you or what support you have. You've got to believe in yourself. Whether that's in a business aspect, whether that's in a military, whether that's taking on any task or crusade or practice, you've got to believe in yourself. And so it didn't really matter what support I had, because I believed in myself.
What was it like transitioning from, as you mentioned there, a family that wasn't close, maybe a little bit unsupportive, and moving into a space like the Royal Marines, where you're almost part of a brotherhood, people have your back? Was that quite the transition to make?
It wasn't a transition for me at all, because it was what I was missing in my life. So I just fit it in perfectly. I'd found my place in the world. I'd finally found the family I was looking for. So it wasn't a transition at all. I didn't find it hard to integrate into that feeling of brotherhood and having people who actually genuinely had your back 100% and would die for you, because that's what I would have given in return. And it was what I was missing all along, and it proper just filled that little space in my heart and in my body where that I was looking for. So it wasn't a transition at all.
A lot of the special forces guests we've had on this podcast talk a lot about the practice of being able to build yourself a strong, resilient mindset, from maybe putting yourself into uncomfortable positions, on purpose, putting yourself through hard times and pushing through and just naturally building a mindset that, you know, people aren't just born with, they have to work towards. In your experience, you know, leading into the special forces, going through that career, what goes into building a, you know, a resilient mindset in your eyes, and how was that experience for you?
Yeah, building a resilient mindset is exactly that. It's a practice. It's something you have to work at, and you have to work damn hard at it, because it's human instinct not to want to be put in uncomfortable positions. That's just a fact. But yeah, what makes you tough is exactly that, putting yourself through arduous situations and difficult situations. The closest analogy I think I can think of, which always stuck with me, was what what makes the strongest tree? Tree is the tree that's there in the storms, and it's there in the gale force winds, and it's got to fight to get to the top of the canopy to get to the sun. You know, that is what makes it strong. That's what makes it sturdy. And the principle for human beings is the same. You know, it's strong human beings are made by being, you know, in difficult situations, and that's how it is. And I knew that from the go set, once I joined the Marines, that I figured that out very quickly, that you've just got to accept these uncomfortable, difficult situations, and then almost learn to love it, learn to switch your mindset on it, and don't shy away from it. Accept the fact that the only way you're going to get better and the only way you're going to reach the goals you want to get to is by putting yourself through those really hard situations, because that's what's going to test you. That's what's going to build the character, and you've got to keep doing it over and over again. And I figured that out quite early in my career, and learned to actually enjoy it and try and look for those situations, because I knew it was toughening me up. It was making me a better soldier. It was making me a better person. And when I then went on to selection and went on to special forces, I think I had a lot of experience to draw back on. So when times were tough, or tougher than I'd experienced before, I knew how to sort of deal with it previously. And I just drew back on those experiences, and took the same mindset of, this is going to make me stronger in the long run. As hard as it is now, and as horrible as it is now, because believe me, it was pretty damn horrible. I knew it was for the great good.
You mentioned special forces selection there, and you know, for the average person like myself, I can't really imagine what that process is like. I think, you know, we see glimpses or little tasters of what it may be, you know, parts could look like when we see these TV shows that try and put people through similar situations, but we don't know what being in that position is like. I wonder if you could just sort of explain how grueling a process something like special forces selection really is.
Yeah, yeah. it's not. Look, I mean, what you see on the telly and what you see on various programs and things like that. I think what they're trying to do there is get the basic principles across in a very, I guess, lighter way, a softer way, but trying to get the basic principles across. Selection is taking, you know, the best of the best soldiers that Britain has to offer, and they expect you to be at the top of your game already. So now they're going to take you far beyond what you've ever experienced before. And that is extremely difficult. And they do push you to the furthest limits you can go. And that's for obvious reasons. And it's a process they do, and they've been doing it for a long time to get the best out of the trainees, you know, the guys on selection, because they're looking for certain things, some things that I guess you could build on, but there's also some things that they're looking for that are instinctive and that the soldiers already have. And I talk about this a little bit in my book, but more extensively into the actual selection processes, each individual selection process, and what it's kind of designed to do, and how it's designed to try and get certain results and bring out certain things out of you that you might not have known you've even got, but ultimately they might see it already in you. But yeah, it was very difficult, psychologically and physically. But I enjoyed it, if I'm honest. Call me sadistic, call me whatever you want, but I enjoyed it. It was one of the best things I've ever done, because it taught me so much about myself, and how far and how tough I actually was, how far I could go and how tough I actually was. It was a phenomenal process, and I'll never forget it. And I'll take the lessons I learned and the things that I learned about myself throughout the rest of my life. And in actual fact, the reason I think I'm still around today is probably from what I was taught on my selection course.
Well, I was gonna say, obviously going through, you know, something like selection, you know, it pushes you to places you've never been. It shows you what you're truly capable of. It undoubtedly builds more and more resilience. And I wonder, how is that resilience translated now and helped you in this new phase of life, this new career? How do you carry that over? And yeah, what can you point to?
Yeah, absolutely. That resilience, that strength of mind. I've been very fortunate because of what I was taught and the career I had before my injury. I built up quite a strong mental resilience to tough situations, psychologically. So that really, I was able to transfer those skills into after my injury. Once I was shot and I'd gone through my recovery phase, and I got to the phase where I was trying to rebuild my life and finding it very hard. Again, I had a bit of past experience I could draw back on when the chips were down, when times were tough. I had some previous experiences that I could really draw from. So I was very fortunate there, and I'm sure there's other people that don't have that. But there's other not characteristics, other virtues that I learned throughout my career in the special forces, and yeah, courage in the face of adversity is one massive one. You've got to have courage, even when you're really scared. And believe me, I get scared. Everyone does. Being scared is not something to be embarrassed about or shy away from. It's humans being natural. It's being normal. It's about what you do with that fear. Fear is instinct. Fear is human instinct, and courage and bravery is a choice. Is a human choice. So you have the decision to how you face that fear. So I had all these things that I drew on to help me throughout my recovery period and my adjustment period when I got back to becoming a normal civilian again and trying to build a normal life in what was a completely new world for me. The other thing that I learned and took forward was, well, actually two things. One was humility, and always be humble. Always try and learn from others and learn from people who have more experience than you. And the other one, which was really important, was to always have humor, always have a laugh. Don't take everything so seriously and think about the doom and gloom all the time. One thing we do very well in the military is we love to take the piss out of ourselves. We love to take the mick, and we love to just have that humor. It's almost black humor, and that also gets you through some really hard times. It just breaks the intensity when it's really, really tough, when things are really bad, or when you're in a situation. Sometimes, it's always good to have a little bit of a laugh and a giggle, because it just resets your mind, and then you can kind of go again. So I've always kept that with me. Always try and have a laugh. But these sort of virtues that I'm talking about, again, I talk about it quite a lot in the book, and how to use those virtues in the right way and in dark times, and just throughout your life. There are lessons that I'm very glad I learned at quite a young age. I'm very, very glad that I learned them.
Well, on that, the title of your book is Never Will I Die. I wonder when this motto, call it whatever you will, first came to you, and how it affects the way you live your day-to-day life.
Well, the motto, Never Will I Die, is just it's an analogy. I mean, for just never give up. It's pretty much what it means in a nutshell: is never stop trying, never give up, never surrender. No matter what happens, just keep going. And the saying came from when me and a couple of my mates, when we were young, we were quite naughty, and we used to get up to a lot of trouble, or we used to get into a lot of trouble. And it was just something we used to say to ourselves before we were about to do something pretty naughty, pretty far out there, and we knew we were probably going to get in a lot of trouble, or it could go bad, it could go wrong, and that was one yeah, we used to say it to ourselves all the time to try and, get us psyched, get us, pumped for whatever we were about to do. And also we used to say it a lot when we were on our dirt bikes, when we were about to do some big gnarly jump or some sort of crazy thing where again it could end badly. But going back to it, you've got to be 100%, you've got to be 100% invested. And that means never will I die, never will I. You've got to believe it. You got to have that mindset of, yeah, I can defeat this, I can beat this. And whether that be jumping, yeah, whatever, 10-foot gap or paddling out on that huge swell that looks like it's gonna just swallow you whole, or you're about to do something really, really, really stupid. But that's where it came from as a kid, and then taking it forward, it's just always stuck with me to try and give me a bit of encouragement and a boost. Obviously, as I've got older, I'm a lot more mature now, so it's kind of evolved a little bit more of now. Just it's evolved into more of a, I guess, just a saying that gives me encouragement, and when I have to work on something, or when I feel like things are getting on top of me, it's a saying that I can always think of, and it always makes me laugh, or it always makes me feel a bit of encouragement. And that's why I wanted the book to be called Never Will I Die, because it's stuck with me throughout my life. And now that I'm paralyzed from the neck down, and there are some dark days, and there are some really, really tough times, that saying has just kept me going, So that's why it's just such a perfect title for the book. And I've got it, tattooed on me, and it's just perfectly placed. So that's why I wanted the title to be that.
It's extremely powerful, man. And I want to talk a little bit about, this new phase of your career, and what you're up to now, and, how you find purpose and meaning through what you do now. But just to add a little bit of context, you alluded to it there. And for anyone listening, they can hear this story in immense detail in the book, which I will leave a link to in the description below, so everyone go and check that out. But just for a little bit of context, would you mind maybe explaining the incident that brought your military career to its end?
Yeah, of course. So we were on a job. I was out in Afghanistan at the time with my squadron, my Sabre squadron, my SF squadron, and we were doing direct ops, going after high value targets, and we'd been given a job. We'd been given a job that was pretty dangerous. We knew, well, most of our jobs, we know we're going into a firefight. We know it's going to get pretty nasty or pretty tasty. Anyway, we after we'd done our orders and we'd gotten our spec of the job, and I'd gotten all my kits and everything prepared, my rifle, and done everything I needed to do. We drove down to the helos, got on the helos, and we were dropped off about roughly, I don't know, about 8 to 10 miles from target. and yeah, it was quite a long walk in that night. And these are basic things that we do a lot of the time, for obvious reasons, under the cover of darkness. And we got to our target, and we normally would use explosives to kind of punch through a hole or blow the doors off the hinges of the target. But unfortunately, on this situation, we'd been given intel that there were kids on target and civilians. So unfortunately, that sort of method of entry was denied. Or we weren't allowed to sort of do that. So we had to kind of kick down the door. And this made quite a bit of racket, and I think it gave away our element of surprise, and gave the enemy the opportunity to set up in their strategic positions, because they knew where we were coming from, and it gave them time to prepare. So once we finally made our entry, it went very kinetic very quickly, and there were rounds being rounds basically coming from all directions. And unfortunately, I and a couple of my colleagues got shot, and one of the rounds, well, I caught up a burst just straight up the side of the wall, and one round went through the side of my neck, and the other round ricocheted off the side of my helmet. And the one round that went through my neck, unfortunately, hit directly into my spinal column and severed my spinal cord from sort of the high cervical vertebrae down, which stopped me breathing instantly and paralyzed me for the rest of my life. The guys came in after me, dragged me out, and started working on me and trying to save my life in the middle of the dark. It was a very intense situation. We had guys, still assaulting the compound, still fighting the enemy. We had guys trying to save my life, but also making sure the area was secure. It was a very intense night, but I think I'm brushing over it now, but the book really goes into the operational detail far better than I could probably tell it now, and gives it that real sense when you read the book, of the smells and the sights and the what was actually going on. It really goes into it in quite a lot of detail, and it was a very intense night. But that was the end of it. The next thing I know, I was back in the UK.
And when you sort of eventually come round, what I can't even begin to imagine, but what is going through your head right away? Do you have any awareness of what has even happened at this point, or is it just someone's got to catch you up to speed, or how does that even?
I remember waking up and just being in sort of a very confused state of mind. I'd been in a coma for about 3 months, and the last thing I remember is being in a firefight with rounds going off everywhere and being pitch black and assaulting the enemy. Now I'm flat on my back, staring up at the ceiling. I can't move. My head's all fuzzy. I can't talk at that point. At that point, I can speak. And there's all these strange, people around me that I've never seen before. So it was a very scary situation. And my immediate thought was that I'd been captured and I was, under interrogation, which was even more scary. And I had to think on my feet straight away. I had to go back into that mindset that I was taught on my selection course of what we must do when we're in that situation of being captured. So I started going through the basics of that, and I was very closed off, and I was only talking and saying things that I very methodically, going through what I was saying, because I didn't trust anyone, super paranoid. And it was only until my actual sergeant major came through and spoke to me directly that I started to believe what the doctors were telling me. So it took me a long time. This was, after about 2 or 3 weeks after I'd woken up. But that phase was very scary. And again, I talk about it far better in the book because it's hard to go back to all those memories. But it was a very intense, scary process or period. But the British Special Forces training is so good. In a way, I was actually really prepared for it, and I was really prepared for it, and that's all credit to the selection, the British SF selection process,
So yeah, again, obviously, there are a lot of physical and mental implications that you have to deal with from this point on. But one thing I'd love to talk to you about, because it really fascinates me about those with military careers, is that you hear this common theme among them, that when their time in the military is up for whatever reason, whether it's injury, whether they've just decided to retire, that a lot of people struggle with a loss of identity, because up to that point, being in the military is all they've ever known. That's the most important thing in their life, and all of a sudden you've got to adjust to life where you're not that military man anymore. How did you deal with that sort of identity shift?
I found it very hard when I first started to realize the implications of my injury, and that I couldn't be that person anymore. My entire life up to that point was built on being a very physical, active, outdoors, strong character, almost an alpha male character, if you like. And all of that had been taken away in a split second. And I had to figure out how to rebuild my life and figure out who this new person was, which was it was very, very difficult, because it was like I was learning. I had to learn who I was again from scratch, and I think one of the things that you can also take into other aspects in reality is you've got to be able to pivot. You've got to be able to turn and adjust and then make a go of it. So after a while, and this again, it takes time, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I got to a point where, I decided, okay, I've got to learn to make a life with what I've got, and I've got to learn how to adapt and adjust. Otherwise, I don't really know what the other option is. If I'm honest, yeah. And I did actually at a point I started seeking out what the other options would be. I did look at how it was possible to end my life legally and things like that, because I just didn't see any way forward. And I didn't see how I would ever be able to adjust, but I did. Somehow I did. I think with the right help and the right mind frame of what the SF mindset is all about, which is that resilience, that real resilience. I started piecing my life back together bit by bit, how I could best possible. I figured I still had my brain. I still had a very active brain. The body was shut down, but the mind and me as a person was still there. I was still inside. So I started building on that. I started working really hard on developing that, and I went back to school and I started strengthening my mind, just like I would with my body. I went back to school. I started doing my GCSEs again, and then I progressed on to. I didn't just stop after my GCSEs. I went on to do my A levels again, and I got 4 straight A levels, 4 straight A's in my A levels. And then after that, I said, no, that's not good enough. I still need to progress. And I went to university, and I got a first class honors degree in business. And then I wanted to build my own company. So I started working on that and developing myself in that aspect, because I knew it was something I could still do. And I just kept putting in that 100%, that 110%, no matter what, just going for it. And I started chipping things off my to-do list and building my life back to a point where I felt like I had something to give. And then I started building my company, Bravery, which was an extreme sports brand, which is involved in, motocross and dirt bikes and surfing. And that kept me back involved in the sports that were, just the sports that I wanted to be involved in. And yeah, I started building this company around a message of also trying to take the skills I had learned throughout my life and bring them or pass them on to others, much like what I'm doing now, but in the sense of a company or a brand. People can see Bravery as a brand and a company and go, oh, there's a lot you can take from this. Yeah, it's not just a T-shirt, or it's not just a logo. A logo, that's an emblem, or that's a badge you can wear with pride and honor. So that's what I'm doing now, and I've gone on to write my own autobiography. This book we've been talking about, and again, that's to help others and to pass on the knowledge that I've learned throughout my military career of being a special forces operator and being a full-time businessman, and all the pitfalls and all the lessons I've learned throughout my life. It's all, it's all there. It's just, you got to keep going, you just got to keep going step by step, one foot in front of the other. And that's how I've, rebuilt my life. And that's how I've gotten to where I am today.
Is incredibly inspiring story, and for me, the best part of it all is that you've managed to take something that people would see as a tragedy or something on its surface level, where people would say it's a negative thing, and you've managed to process that, spin it, and turn it into something beautiful through a brand like Bravery, or the messaging you send out there to people. Is that what's important to you now, is finding a lot of purpose and meaning in your career right now?
Yeah, I think human beings need purpose. I find without purpose, that's when human beings get lost. And that's where a lot of these mental problems that, people are struggling with these days. I think a lot of it's because people can't find purpose. They can't find that drive and that direction, which is what human beings were supposed to always have since the dawn of time. But we live in an era now where it's a lot harder, because 1,000 years ago, our primary objective and purpose was to survive and find food and shelter and look after our kids. And the world we live in now is very different. So to find proper purpose is very hard. I now used my company in helping others and turning this really, really horrible, tragic, like you say, situation into a purpose for good, or a force for good. And why not, man? Let's just do something different and turn it on its head and take all that energy and put it into maybe helping some other people, maybe helping the youth of today, or maybe just someone who's struggling. Maybe this story will help them. That's one of the main reasons I wrote the book, but it's also one of the main reasons I started the company. And it gives me purpose when I see my story helping others, it gives me purpose. I find purpose in that. And then I find purpose in my suffering and in my pain and struggling and, all the horrible things that come with being paralyzed. Because believe me, it's not a nice thing. It's not nice. It's not cushy. It's not all roses. It's horrible, and it's a lot of suffering. But I just take that suffering and think I'll turn it into, helping others, and that, really focuses the mind and gives me purpose.
Amazing. And I think this is a beautiful way to wind down now, and before we let these guys know where they can find more from yourself and point them towards everything, I've got one final question that I ask every guest on the show, no matter what the topic is. And the question is, for Tobias Gutteridge right now, what makes life worth living?
I think what makes life worth living is that you never know what the future holds. You never know what tomorrow is going to bring. And that's exciting. That's exciting. That should be something that should make you want to get up in the morning, because you just never know. This world has so many twists and turns and so many beautiful things to experience. That, yeah, for me personally, every day is just is really special, and you gotta make the most of it, you know, because life is short, and I yeah, I just want to see every sunrise that I possibly can before my day is done on this planet, you know, and that to me is worth living for, you know.
Beautiful, my friend. So let's let everyone listening know where they can find Bravery, where they can find the book, and where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, of course. So social platforms. You can find me on Instagram, Toby Gutteridge _official. That's my personal Instagram. And then Bravery, my company, is Instagram account that's at Bravery _UK. To check us out on Instagram. And then you can check out Bravery's website, which is www.bravery.org.uk. And that's the company that I founded and everything we've just talked about. Yeah, if anyone wants to buy the book that's just come out now called Never Will I Die, you can purchase it on Amazon or on Waterstones. Just type in Never Will I Die, Toby Gutteridge, and yeah, it'll come up. And yeah, you can get an audiobook version or hardback, softback, whatever your preference is. But it's a great read. It's a great book. It's all about inspiration and resilience. And I think people get a lot from it, no matter what background you come from or how old you are. There's something there for everyone, you know.
Amazing. Well, all those links you mentioned there will be in the show notes below for everyone to easily click on and check out. Toby, thanks again so much for your time today. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege to host you, my friend.
I appreciate it. And I really appreciate him giving me this opportunity to tell my story. So thank you.